Thank you so much for joining us for yet another episode of our TechTrends Podcast. And as I said in the previous episodes, I find the interviews you're doing at this summit quite interesting because I've spoken to so many interesting, tech leaders about the innovations they are building. We just spoke from, Sharon from Yellow Card. I spoke from, so a real interesting conversation we're having with a lot of tech industry leaders in Kenya and across Africa. So thank you so much for joining us, Andrew. So maybe start by introducing yourself and telling us who you are.
Yeah, my name is Andrew Fassnidge. I'm founder of Africa Tech Summit, an Irish guy who's been working in Africa for most of my life. For probably 16 years I've worked in Africa. Started working in mobile space originally, so I worked in a mobile startup that was selling into telcos. In fact, I launched a service with a telco in Kenya that doesn't even exist anymore called You. If you remember You, they were called YU.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And I also launched services with Safaricom, and so I spent a lot of time going around the continent from 2008-9.
Yeah.
And when I'd come to Nairobi to meet Safaricom or You, I would go to iHub or Nilabs even, and I was meeting these kids, and were 6, 17, 18, and they were showing me these. I was like, "How would you build that?" They're like, "Oh, well, I taught myself to code," and I was like, "Oh my God!" So my day job was with the telcos, which I always felt was like a bit of a dinosaur. Maybe not so much in Kenya because actually mobile money and stuff originated here, but these guys were in this whole new era of building amazing tech solutions, and we weren't in that era of, Wi-Fi everywhere. It was still pretty small connections and dial-up connections and things. So these guys were building under extreme circumstances and building amazing companies. So that inspired me. Number one, I started a blog, which is still there today, appsafrica.com. It's a news and technology blog around connecting business, technology, investment. And that was the first part where I felt like I actually need to tell some stories similar to what TechTrends does. Tell stories of some ventures who don't get the headlines. And I was meeting amazing kids who are building logistics, e-commerce, fintech. And then from that, everyone would say, "Can you connect me? Can you connect me? Can you connect me?" From a guy to Nigeria, to South Africa, to Egypt. So I spent most of my time connecting people, and then thought, well, why don't we just connect everybody in the room?
Right.
It'll save me sending lots of emails.
Cool. So would you say that's actually the vision of the Africa Tech Summit?
Yeah, I felt there was a lot of other events, but they were very telco focused. And I didn't feel like the people that I was meeting, and that new ecosystem that was really beginning, wasn't really getting connected properly from what I could see. So that's why, that was a driver for me. I'd also, the venture capital piece when we started was only really starting for Africa. Like 2016, our first Africa Tech Summit we did in London, we had about 120 people there, and I probably invited 80 of them. So there was checks at that event being written for $25,000, and that at that time was big. Like if you tell people now, like 25, okay, whatever. Like I think there was 100 startups in Africa last year raised $1 million or more dollars. Okay, we're talking about there was a handful of startups who were raising $25,000. So the angel networks that are existent now weren't there. There was some VC, but very little. So it was a whole different landscape to what we have now. Like venture capital's really taken over. Lots of people are coming into the market with money. So it's changed dramatically in the last 10 years.
So 2016, that's when you had your first event. And you were in 2025, and of course, the summit has grown to be one of the most successful, tech summits in Africa actually. And I've attended the ones that come to Nairobi. What would you say are some of the key milestones that have defined the summit so far?
This year?
No, actually throughout
the year. Yeah, it's changed. Someone said something to me recently about these. I don't want to go to any more startup events, and I think that's what's changed for us. When we started the event, everybody was a startup and everybody was looking just to raise money. I think what we see now, and it's taken a long time, is it's a trade show. So not everybody here is looking to raise money now. In fact, I just met somebody there, said, you raising money? She's like, no, not really. I'm cultivating relationships is what she said. She's here, I'm here to sell. I'm here to do business. So I think for us, the event has metamorphosized into a business event. And for me, it's very important that if you're coming to meet somebody to do business, that you're meeting that right partner. And so not everybody's here to raise capital, and not everybody's here anymore to find investors. Like if we look at the fintechs that are here, like they've raised a lot of money. They're here to do partnerships and deals. Raynest, our main sponsor, they just raised $11 million yesterday. And even $11 million, people don't go, wow, anymore. They're like, they raised $11 million. Like there's $40, $50 million rounds, $100 million rounds. So I think back at the beginning, it was all about money. Everyone wanted to raise money. And everybody was looking to get capital. It's definitely changed. We went through some crazy years of COVID, and the investment piece went a bit crazy in terms of valuations. The US and the dollar and inflation has had a massive effect in the last 12 months. So what we're seeing now is a lot of tourist investors have vanished. The real investors are here. The real people who were there here before that are here and will always be here. I think one of the biggest changes and most positive changes in my short time doing this is founders, African founders, who've made money are reinvesting in African founders. And that didn't exist before. And I think that's a massive positive for the ecosystem, because you have founder in Kenya who maybe has made some money, who knows the market, who knows the pain points. Whereas there was also some bias towards white founders and not looking at African founders. Same with female founders looking at male founders. Whereas you've got Africans investing in Africans. They know what you want. And they know the pain point that your mum has at the market, or someone has it in a tattoo or whatever. So that's a game changer.
Because I think one of the biggest conversations we've previously had, and we've discussed that, even covered stories around that, is why were we not seeing Africans investing in African startups? But that is changing, actually.
I definitely think so, I think even if you go down to the angel network and the syndicate side, huge. Like Nigeria especially, really strong. Really, really strong network. South Africa as well. But like the angel network piece is also like a huge piece of the jigsaw that took years to build. People like Tommy Davies from ABAN really worked. He's chairman of ABAN now, president. He worked tirelessly to set up angel networks, because sometimes you want to invest, I want to invest, but we can't write a check for $1 million, right? But if you have a syndicate of people, maybe you can. So the syndicate piece and the angel piece came a lot of head of the VCs, and let's remember, the VCs need the angels and the seed funding to get the guy going, because the VCs like, you're too small. Come back to me when you have this X, Y, and Z. So what's the guy going to do? Go off and not do it, or find some other capital? So the rungs of the ladder of capital have improved. If I'm honest right now, I think what we're really crying out for is one major success story. I'm not saying there's not success stories, but a major exit. InterSwitch for years was touted as being the one that would be the unicorn. They were supposed to float maybe in London. I don't know if that will still happen. Flutterwave, we hear maybe will float. They're trying to float in the US. It doesn't matter where. We just need one successful. And sorry, that's the important point, because Jumia, there's been other flotations and they've crashed and burned in different markets. So, we also host Africa Tech Summit in London at London Stock Exchange. London Stock Exchange is very, very keen to get African technology companies away. I think then, because what happens then, you have a flotation, the founders get liquidity, the investors get liquidity, that liquidity can go back into the next. And right now we do have secondary markets where investors can get some money out in secondary markets. But I think, if you look at the success of US and maybe some European markets in technology, it's IPOs and exits where people actually get to liquidate, make some money and reinvest. And we need that circle. And I think right now is tough, you know. Nigeria is struggling, Africa is struggling, most places are struggling with inflation, interest rates. So we need to get more money back into the system, and that will happen with exits. I think also we're going to see a lot of mergers and acquisitions in the next 12 months.
And just on that, do you think, you know, of course we've seen a lot of, you know, the funding freeze that is all over the media and the US government. And we've actually done a podcast around how this, for example, the US funding freeze is going to affect a lot of health tech startups that have been funded by USAID.
Yeah.
You know, do you think this move is going to, at some point, affect startups that really rely on funding from, from the West? And also, do you think now that means a lot of these startups need now to come and build solutions that actually make them sustainable?
Yeah, so I've heard varying degrees on. Back in the day when the ecosystem was very, very young, like most startups really relied on grants.
Yeah,
they did rely on grants. But I heard an investor recently say to me, "If we see grants, it's a red flag." I said, "Why?" And they said, if you can't sustain your business with funding, bootstrapping, whatever, you need grant funding, continued grant funding, well, then you're pushing your line out to profitability or raising or making money. And I think that's become much more in focus in the last year and a half, because investors prior to COVID and maybe after COVID, there was a lot of crazy money came into the ecosystem. And I would say the investors who were here before the boom and are here now still, we're crying foul that actually the valuations were crazy. People are laughing at them and saying, "Well, you're not willing to write the checks," but they're still here now. Those guys are all still here. Your TLCom, Echo VC, Paratech, Proparco, IFC. I could go on. Like there's an endless amount of VCs who, Novastar Ventures, they've been here from the get-go. They're still here. But what they were saying was the valuation piece has gone crazy. Because when you got so much money, I was on calls where guys were like, right at the end of a Zoom call, right, you need to say whether you want to invest or not, without any due diligence. So that it went a bit lula. That's an Irish phrase for crazy. But I think there's more reality now, and coming back to your point on the grant funding, you know, investors are very much now focused on, show me you're making some revenue. How are you going to make this work? What's your profitability? What's your route to profitability? Because then they can invest more long term. So the grant piece, it's a double-edged sword, because I don't want to say that grant funding is not needed, because if we look at food programs and we look at education, water, maybe some health, where traditional VCs aren't going to get a return. So who's going to fill that void? So you still do need grant funding. I won't even get into the politics of the decisions that are happening right now. And I know it's going to affect people at the bottom of the pyramid, people who rely on food programs and donor programs and water programs and those things that really are helping society, that are maybe not an investable piece for a VC. So it's a tricky situation right now. I think for anyone who's into health tech or education tech, there's plenty of investors to invest. So you probably shouldn't be relying on grant funding. But that's not to say, like, if you're going to start a business and someone's going to offer you 100 grand to get you going, of course you're going to take it. Why would you not take it? It'd be a bad business decision. But yeah, I've spoken to a lot of people here for the last 2-3 days, and the USA thing is very topical. There's a lot of people losing their jobs in these programs and different programs. That VC is never going to follow. You know, like VC is not going to invest in water pumps and sanitation. And we do need programs and philanthropy that comes in and does those programs. But I also have heard of a few things this week where some philanthropic organizations are willing to offer bridging loans to people who've been affected with USAID and things like that. So it's a tough situation.
And what do you think, let me cycle back. Of course, there are a lot of startups in different sectors. Which startups do you think are getting so much attention right now from VCs? Which sectors?
I would say fintech's always strong, and has always been strong across the continent. But I think we've seen somewhat of a slowdown. Probably more focus on the winners and the bigger companies. So your likes of MoneyPoint, Rainest, Flutterwave, Paystack, Fincra, guys who've been around a while and have shown a track record. Peach Payments in South Africa. Obviously in Kenya, you've Cellulent and a whole host of other good fintechs here. Taraco and Lamy Insurance. So fintech's always been there and will always be there, but I do think in some markets we're looking at 10 to 15 players who are all tackling the same problem. So I think we're going to see some mergers and acquisitions there. Climate tech is definitely a growth area. I think the difference between when we started this 10 years ago, we always covered agri-tech. Africa pretty much invented pay-as-you-go solar before climate tech became, you had your M-Copas and a whole host of other players, Sun Culture and but that was only appealing to a certain type of investor, like the grant funding we spoke about, or philanthropic guys. Some VCs were getting involved, but what we're seeing now is VCs, LPs are saying, you need to be investing in climate. So when the money suddenly is being told it needs to go to climate, there's a much greater focus now on climate technology companies. For instance, there's a masterclass upstairs now on electric vehicles. Africa has pretty much, been monumental in pushing EV vehicles for I would say going on 7-8 years. Like we did the Africa Tech Summit in Kigali in 2017, and Ampersand, who are here today, launched their pilot in Rwanda. And there was a couple of other Bazigo and other people who launched EV things. But that's becoming massively in vogue and requires a lot of investment. So these guys are now raising $50 million rounds, $100 million rounds. So I think, look, the world, Donald Trump aside, was very much on a climate focus, and Donald Trump is now said, let's drill for more oil. I don't think that's going to change. I think the genie is out of bottle in most countries. Everybody understands the climate piece and the effects maybe that's having. Kenya, obviously, look, the floods here. Every country's had a real change in what's going on. So I think the climate piece is going to be very, very big. Web3 and crypto. So we run the Africa Money and DeFi Summit also as part of Africa Tech Summit here. And then we also run it in West Africa in September. Crypto died for 2 years and then came back, and it's come back from the dead. But I think this time is different. It's not just about speculation. Like if I look at the sessions here we have today, we have Tether talking about stable coins, Circle talking about stable coins, Celo talking about stable coins. And I see in this ecosystem people transacting in stable coins. When your Naira has dropped 60%, would you hold your money in Naira or would you hold it in stable coins? So where some people think, crypto is all a scam, it's like if you speak to a guy who's lost 60% of his wealth in currency devaluation and he can hold his money steady. So I think the use cases now for crypto are probably more clear than 4 years ago, which was all, look, there's still speculation and people are making money on speculation and trading. But I've always maintained the use case for stable coins in Africa is proven daily. For someone to send me money from DRC or from South Sudan or Egypt to get a bank transfer, to do all this, and they can send me stable coin in a heartbeat. Like, is that not the biggest proof of low friction cross-border trade? I think Web3 and crypto is here to stay. Now, I'm not saying I vouch for everything that's going on, and this is not investment advice for anybody, but like I think if you go into that room today and talk to 10% over 2,000 and ask them do they use stable coins, I guarantee you'll get 25% say yes. And that for me is like just an amazing use case. We were dealing with a girl who was a a journalist or a writer in Nigeria last year, and she was doing some stuff for us. And I said, send me your invoice. She said, what's an invoice? And I said, well, I need your bank details.
Yeah.
And she says, I don't have a bank account. She said, I don't use banks. I use crypto. I'm like, okay. She said, send me stable coins. So this new generation of kids, they're like, a bank account? Why do I need a bank account? Like last night at our welcome reception, we had MasterCard, and they were talking about tokenization. So they have a session here tomorrow on tokenization, and he has a ring that you'll now be able to just tap in a shop and purchase. Instead of tapping with your card, you can now just tap with some jewelry.
All right. So that's some real use cases which people need to be aware of.
Yeah.
Okay. So thank you so much, Andrew. So maybe just as we wind up, so this is first edition of the year. There's another coming in London. What are we expecting for these 2 days that are here?
Yeah, so this is like Nairobi is the flagship event. I mean, like we've done Africa Tech Summit in London. This will be our 9th edition in June, but like there's nothing replicates Africa than doing it in Africa, because even getting people into the UK, I'm Irish, just want to put that on record, it's difficult. Visas and people not getting in and we can do this very frictionless in Nairobi and bring together amazing people from all across the continent. So the next 2 days, it's everything from, like I've been to random sessions on AI, electric vehicles, back over to a session on climate. We've got sessions upstairs then on growing people and growing your team. And, so it's a whole host of amazing people and thought leadership guys who, for me, unfortunately, our team are working, don't really get this. I get to watch the videos in about 2 months. But there's so much great stuff. I think AI, what I just heard on that one session on AI there in terms of, the revolutionary changes that are going to come in education, in health tech, cancer screening, like the ability to spot people's diseases in a rapid fire, and get them in quickly and potentially give them treatment. Stuff that people die probably more from a lack of diagnosis quickly. So the jury's out on some AI, but when I look at these things, and it's the same, look, we could say the same with the internet, we could say the same with crypto. There's always a good and a bad. But AI, I think, is very, very interesting as well. I also feel, what I feel here now is a bit of optimism. I think there's been a tough period for the last 12 months. I think the VC ecosystem is kind of stabilized. Some have left. The real people are here still, and they're still writing checks. They're still looking for deals. So anybody who gives the doom and gloom that there's no money in African tech investing, I would disagree. I've spoken to 4 or 5 investors out there who are all writing checks and are looking for company. One of them said, I'm looking for the right companies. Whereas maybe 4 or 5 years ago, there was a spray mentality for some investors. It was like, if I back 15, one's a winner, I get a 20x or 30x, then I've made my return. But I think there's a bit of caution, but also a bit more reality on the founder side as well, where before valuations got a bit crazy because people were writing checks at those valuations. But the problem is, those high valuations, you then have to deliver your profitability. In Nigeria, for example, even if you're growing and your currency's down 60%, you're not growing in dollar terms. So a lot of these companies who raised big rounds had to then have down rounds, and then it's harder to raise the next round because they're like, your numbers aren't hitting where you were hitting the last time. So it can get messy. But I think almost like, I feel like we've kind of flushed a lot of it out of the system now, and anyone who's raising money now will start at a kind of a floor level and then go again. And I think the ecosystem, for me, feels like it's stabilized, and I think we're on another step up. But also, I think it's maturing. Like, I think if you look at what happened in the .com boom, like people go, oh, like all these companies are failing in Africa. I'm like, hold on. Did you not remember the .com era? When every second company that was on the NASDAQ crashed and burned. Like, every ecosystem has a churn.
Yeah.
And I think what we're seeing now is founders who are on to their second and third businesses as well. And the talent piece where they've trained people in their businesses who've now gone on to be founders as well. I've seen that a lot here. If you look at the guys from Rainest, originally he was at Andela. One of them was at Andela, and I think one of them was at Paystack. So the learning that some of these founders have been given at other companies, they've gone off to create their own companies. And I think that 10 years ago wasn't really there.
Yeah.
So I think the talent piece is really getting strong as well. We're getting some really, really good founders. And as we come back to the other bit, like African investors invest in African businesses, for me, maintains control for Africans, which is vital.
Yeah, very vital. Yeah.
Because investors with a different lens from outside, they've got a certain lens that they're looking for. Whereas a guy from Eldoret or something has got a great idea, and you've been to Eldoret and you know what he's talking about, and you're like, okay, I can invest in that. Yeah, so it's look, it's a work in progress, I think, across the continent. And but what I'm seeing today here for our 7th edition on the continent is immaturity in the ecosystem. Like, it's really starting to like, some of these companies were babies a few years ago, and the rate of growth has just been phenomenal. And also companies who are now not just looking at Africa, but also going, we could launch this in Southeast Asia, Europe, America. Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much, Andrew. So what next for Africa Tech Summit?
Well, after here, we take everybody needs a break.
Yeah. My
team are all, look at Emily. Emily's tired there. Our team have worked incredibly hard, and we'll take a little bit of downtime, and then we go for Africa Tech Summit in June in London. And then we will be back in West Africa for our Africa Money and DeFi Summit in Ghana. And who knows, we might have some other interesting developments. But I think we need to take a little rest after this one.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Andrew, for joining us. It's actually good for us to have this conversation, to talk about understanding the VC space, the startup space, and of course your contribution to that space. So thank you so much for joining us, and I'll see you in the next episode.
Well, and I just say thank you for having me, and thanks for all the great content that I read that you guys create.
Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah.
So we hope to host you once again. Hope you get a chance to attend the different summits, and we're gonna sit down and just still have these conversations. Because every year there's always something new to talk about. So we look forward to that. Thank you so much for joining us. I'll see you in the next episode.